Hello, everybody, and welcome to this great session as a part of NITI Aayog's FinTech Open Month. Today's discussion is going to be around democratizing access to financial services for a billion Indians using technology. And to talk about that, we have two people that I believe nobody is better equipped to talk about using technology at scale for India. We have Dr. Pramod and Mr. Dilip Asbe. Two people that I hold in very, very high regard. They are an inspiration, John, not just for me, and not just for the entire fintech ecosystem, but for the entire startup ecosystem. Dr. Pramod Varma is the chief architect of Aadhaar, the digital identity program in India, which is probably the most scalable system, project, and program that I can think of anywhere in the world. We are all so proud of the fact that the Aadhaar system covered the identity for, I believe, a billion Indians in less than 5 years, and now everybody within 7 years, which is phenomenal. But not just that, he is the architect behind DocuSign, UPI, and now digital public goods for learning through the EkStep organization, where he's trying to actually, or he's already put out open source building blocks for learning that have touched the lives of millions of students in India, enabling education. So a big champion of digital public goods as infrastructure. Dr. Pramod, welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Pleasure to be here, Rahul. You're being kind. By the way, it's not DocuSign, it's eSign. DocuSign is, I think, company. Yeah, that's all right.
And we have Mr. Dilip Asbe. Dilip is the MD and CEO of NPCI, the organization that powers UPI, IMPS, RuPay, the Bharat Bill Pay system. And while he's the MD and CEO, for me and for a lot of us, he is the inspiration behind the product, the operationalization, and the continuous visioning of UPI, IMPS, RuPay, which is actually now our homegrown card network, taking the card system by storm. And I personally known Dilip for the last few years, have had amazing, engaging conversations around technology and product. And while he's the CEO, I treat him as the CPO of NPCI, and I'm so excited to have him also on this panel. Dilip, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Fun to be there.
So a little about the topic today. I think democratizing financial services for whole of India is a huge task. But if you look back, through having a well future provisioned blueprint by using digital public goods as infrastructure, what India has really achieved is the fact that without all the traditional infrastructure that is needed for reach, for connectivity, or for everything that is the building blocks for financial services, we've leapfrogged to a time when every Indian is able to use their phone to identify themselves for making payments and much more. So by making identity, payments, basic utilities, but powered through technology, what India has ensured is that we are not left behind, although we are a country of countries in many ways because of the social stratas being so wide, the dichotomy when it comes to the haves and the have-nots and the large country that we are. So now what's next? How do we actually take this forward with not just payments, but also kind of taking this to all sorts of financial services, whether it's lending, whether it's insurance, and much more? What are the next steps? So to kick it off, would love to actually pose the question. While we've actually laid out the rails, right? The rails for identity, the rails for payments, and we have all the kind of infrastructural pieces in place, how should the fintech and the startup ecosystem think about utilizing this to go well beyond the success that we've seen on payments towards financial services? So Pramod, if you want to start off, Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Thanks, Rahul. First of all, I think, I'm here with two people again, Dilip, I know since 2009, I just obviously bumped into him when I joined Aadhaar team. And I think NPCI just started at that time. So we used to have fantastic conversations, totally random conversations, by the way.
I would have loved to be in a part of that. I mean, that would have been so awesome, those early days.
By the way, talking as early as, APS and other ways, in front of the house, how could people literally pay number as an payment address? The idea of payment address, by the way, came as early as 2009-10 conversations. Later it became VPA and all that thing, right? we formalized it. But this idea that anything could be a payment receptacle and anything could be addressable, payment addressable, is a very powerful construct, an architecture construct. And you're all architects as well. So we get excited about these abstractions, So we've been talking about this. But I think what I loved about working with Dilip, and I just want to put down the table, is that he was a CTO then, and he's a CPO, he's a CEO now. He's the ability for him to match our craziness and abstraction. Sometimes we are like 10 years, and he keeps saying, you guys are freaking 10, 15 years ahead, and I need to bridge the gap, right? So I think he has a very practical, operational, and in-depth understanding of what is actually truly a plus one for the ecosystem. What is plus one for banks? What's plus one for wallets then? What's plus one for fintech? And then we take many plus one steps, right? Yeah. Towards the crazy drawing we might have drawn in some random room. But I think these conversations in the last decade has really abstracted in 3 levels, right? And then we came into, obviously touch with you when you quit Flipkart and you and Samir trying to figure out, and then we conned you into doing something, betting on UPI, and said, hey, it's a great place to be. And I know and it really, I think it's never, when you're looking back, it's never a success of an individual, never a success of an individual institution. It's anything at population scale is a success of so many people and policies, nudges, conversations, people, everybody putting their part to it, right? It's not just one person. Yeah, there's vision, there's architect, then there is execution, people who are bureaucrats who are moving files, answering parliament, then getting Supreme Court stuff done. There's so many things to be actually looked back. So it's very unfair to attribute to individual success as well. So I just want to make sure that I do convey that we just privileged to be, just happen to be part of that. Yeah, it's just a good thing. Okay, I want to sort of go with the flow here, and I'll set up my abstraction again. I am an architect who, maybe because of my PhD background or whatever, has some visual abstractions that runs in my head, and that's easier for me to communicate that. And you guys can connect it to what's really practical. And I'll let Dilip, I think Dilip is much grounded and practical to talk about a lot of that. My abstraction is this, and I think it may be worth that I show a picture. Maybe it's worth seeing that. You're seeing that picture, right?
Yeah.
And this is everything you've done so far. And it's what is a digital backbone for a digital economy? What's a backbone for the digital economy? It's the 3 primary aspects: who I am, identities, verifiability of identities, decentralized identities, centralized unique identities like Aadhaar, decentralized identities that on a blockchain, self-sovereign identities. It doesn't matter. Identity, who I am. Then what I have is about asset digitization. And that's where data is being converted to an asset today in India. Credentials are being converted to assets. And we are huge, and we are pushing so hard to say, every micro credential, a gig economy worker, or your own PhonePe people who are going sticking QR codes, every proof of work and proof of their reputation and proof of what they do, converting into an asset is key. And when you empower people with their own assets beyond the normal assets, and money is an asset. Money in an account is an asset. Data in an account is an asset. Credentials and certificates in my account is just an NFT is an asset. If you think there's a value, why not? If you can buy and give, random glass piece called gem, to your girlfriend, why not NFT? I mean, it doesn't matter. Value is what you believe the value is, and people are ready to buy. But then comes what I do. And so who I am, what I have, and what I do. When I participate as an individual or an SME, I need choice, opportunities, access, and freedom to transact. And that's where the UPI, account aggregator network, they're all networks, transactional networks. And most importantly, now ONDC, Kochi Mobility Network, the backend protocol work we are doing is about decentralizing what I do. So we decentralize identity, we decentralize asset ownership back to the individual, and then we decentralize the ability to participate in transactions. Everything we've done is to set up these three. And we systematically built, if you look at it, from 1, 2, and 3. If you look at 1 was Aadhaar and all that thing, and 2 was about DigiLocker, all that assets, and then data assets, DIPA coming through. And then 3, we are saying now that we have identities and assets that are empowered to the individual, start with lending as a network, the Oken effort and all that thing. Account aggregator based networks. UPI, of course, payment is an underlying commerce network for any that powers everything. And now subsequently, we can think about commerce networks. Hospital, UHI, Universal Health Interface under Ayushman Digital Health Mission, ABDM, is the ability to decentralize wellness and health services and so on. And hospitality services, and India is way behind in hospitality and tourism. We could do all kinds of interesting, and without necessarily doing either extreme. And I will stop there. One extreme is government tries to do everything. That's our BSNL, Air India BSNL world. And we left that world long time ago, and we left systematically to open up, and then government does minimum thing, and the market and the combination of that is starting to play out there. Or the other extreme is to outsource everything to big techs, the tech companies to take over. That's the right extreme. Rightmost extreme, leftmost extreme is socialistic, and rightmost extreme is capitalistic. Where you give it to saying that we are not going to do any infrastructure play. We don't care. Let the market thrive by themselves. And if there is something too big, we'll take an anti-competitive measure and try to break them up. Other than that, we don't really care. That's an American way of sort of doing it, right? But India has taken the middle path, where we have said no, quite like the way the physical world, where the minimum government regulations and the private participation, airports and railroads and transport buses and everywhere, where rules were formed by the government, but the market provided the service. Digital world, you need a digital rail and digital railroads, digital highways, digital backbone. And India played that through the identity asset and what's called overall called India Stack broadly. Collectives called India Stack. And now with the transaction networks, we are consistently doing that and saying the market players like you would thrive on top of that, but underlying empowerment and interoperability, 2 parts, user empowerment and interoperability, and necessary inclusion and diversity, because no single app can solve a billion people problem. So we need to address that. So pretty much it concludes everything we did in 10 years. And, the journey is exciting towards the transaction networks now. Our focus is all about transaction, where the Web3 world completely missing out that point. And you can see those Jack versus everybody in Twitter
huge debates.
Where that's because Web3, while decentralizing, they are decentralizing identity, the layer 1, and decentralizing assets, They're not decentralizing transactions. So OpenSea becomes the biggest NFT platform. And how is it different from Amazon? Or how is it different from anybody else? So we are doing Web2 play on Web3 as, so 1 and 2 are attacked by the Web3 people. 3, the decentralized transaction, interoperable transaction networks, never addressed by them. So it's back to the single monopolistic transaction platforms. Again, that's where the commerce is happening, transaction platforms. But if you don't decentralize and create interoperable network rather than platforms, so platforms to protocols or platforms to network, if you don't make that move, we will left with 1 and 2 being decentralized, 3 being again monopolized by Web2 like platforms, right? So India is just crazy dream. We are just chasing. No one is even trying this in the world, but basically we have nothing else to do, I suppose. So we keep trying. Anyway, sorry for a long ramble. But,
no, that was great.
But I think it sort of sets up my mental picture of
I think it's perfect. If that picture, which gave us a mental map of almost what you're calling as abstractions, building blocks, capabilities, or infrastructure. Dilip, the opportunities that emerge from each of these, right, vertically from just one of them and then connecting the dots is immense. How do you think about product creation, for example, through this at NPCI or in general? And what would be your kind of message to the fintech and the startup ecosystem to take advantage of this and build on top of this?
When you look at, first of all, in full agreement what Pramod said, I think the emphasis on ecosystem is super critical, right? And one institution, one user, or one owner is not the story which India likes in that sense. And this is where I'm actually super impressed. The way India looks at solving the combination, the mid path, right? The building up the digital public goods like Aadhaar, like UPI, and creating an overlay with empowering the ecosystem built up and allowing them to create use cases on top of that public good, right? It's just kind of, that is what fuels the growth, whatever we are seeing up. The second point which I want to make, so it's so great, is got to be the strategy of India laying up the public good digital infrastructures, and obviously all must take credit of that, especially the regulator and the governments. And the second is the ecosystem, right? The banks, fintechs, the vibrant ecosystem, which is actually kind of responding to the technology challenge so superbly. Obviously, we are going to be in a country of such an immense growth with 1.2 billion population that we are always going to feel that we should have done this yesterday, right? So this is going to be always the situation. There is going to be a moving train, and we'll be fixing the moving train. That's part of our life. So it's fine. I'm just saying it's fine to have some problems, but till the time we are aware about those problems and till the time we are putting sincere efforts to fix those problems, I think we are good enough because there is no such perfect situation in at least in the technology world in that sense. The second thing I want to just talk about, Rahul, that when you try to create this innovation, when you try to create this technology using the technology, right? I somehow feel that it can't give 100% only good, right? It might give majority of the good, and it will create some problems of its own, right? And typically these problems are going to be whatever perfect scenario which you create. The literacy and awareness in the country, right? It's not really perfect, and obviously while a lot of efforts have been being put up, but still it's some time away, right? And when you look at this, today, and when while we speak about the 1.2 billion Aadhaars, 1.1 billion accounts, and the mobile phones, smartphones, 500 million plus, and we talk about all this combination resulting in back at least 250 million people are participating in the digital payment ecosystem, right? And I see that digital payment ecosystem is a denominator, right? In that sense. Mm-hmm. So when I look at investments, when I look at the insurance, or when I look at credit, right, which are the traditional financial services pillars, are actually kind of standing up on digital payments as a base, right? So the more we do on digital payments, the better for the ecosystem to expand on credit, insurance, and investments, right? Because these are the three pillars which are actually going to drive the economy of the country, the well-being of the country, and the wealth creation within the ecosystem, right? So in my assessment, now the challenge is going to be how do we now take this 250 million digital payments to 500 million or 700 million people, right? And the challenge is going to be the challenges which we had in 250 million. Maybe now those challenges will be amplified, right? Because of the literacy levels, awareness, and those kind of things. So the whole ecosystem might want to look at now this challenge very differently, right? And when I keep talking about it, that we are now at closer to 200 million transactions a day, and now we go 5x, which is a billion a day, right? Which is what is every NPCI employee's dream, or the UPI ecosystem dream. Let me put it that way. The challenges from this 200 million to a billion are going to be very different, and all the banks, the fintechs, and the ecosystem, the government, the regulator, all of us might want to take a little different views, little different steps than what we have taken before. So that's the way I look at the future of what we intend to do, Rahul. Maybe I'll speak about Web3 and some other things later in the conversation.
Sure.
What I feel at this point.
Rahul, if I may, is it okay if I
please. Yes, please.
add on a comment? Yeah. So I think Dilip's point about what we do for the first 50, 75 million, then for the next, 100, 150 million. So we are at that level. To the next sort of doubling this is not doubling the effort. It's going to be, it's sort of crazy.
It's exponential. Yeah,
exponential actually. Now to deal with exponential complexity, simplicity is an approach we must. So in my mental model cannot be complex. If our mental model is complex, guaranteed to fail execution. Okay, there's no way we are going to get it. That is why I think no monolithic solution approach. Let's build one more better app kind of approach. It doesn't work here. We have to think about, go back to really sort of what mathematicians and all do. Let's start from the basics, right? First principles approach to the first principle. That's exactly why. In fact, while we were speaking, I was looking at the 2013 conversation, UPI conversation 2013. Dilip, Nandan, and I had, and I have a PPT for it. We prepared.
You should share it.
We should NFT it.
Yeah, that's true.
This is August 2010, and I prepared it. And then 1 year we just mulled over. Then we literally picked it up in September 2014. Again, I have the next deck for it. then we obviously, sort of came out, did a bank workshop and all that thing with NPCI arranged. But I think what was our idea of UPI? And I want to just do a little bit of that. The idea of UPI was unified and not an alternate. Unified, the word, again, we didn't mean to be the product name, okay? We were techies who were just calling it some unified interface and going ahead with it. I didn't expect these names to stick. I was hoping that somebody else would put a better name, but we kept calling UPI and never got off it. So now we actually tell NPCI, please be careful what you're starting with the name. Same name sticks for like 10 years. Okay? Don't think you can rename it. Now, the UPI was a unification approach. What does it mean? We already had AEPS, Aadhaar Enabled Payment. Why is AEPS different from UPI? And I'm saying this specifically in this discussion because I know Dilip might find it a little bit tricky. He's a CEO and he's a CEO of NPCI, and he can't sort of say what he's supposed to do or what he will do and all that thing. So I will do a little bit of scary talk for him. Okay, and he can say no to it. But APS, in my mind, is just another way of doing UPI. Instead of PIN on my smartphone, I'm using my fingerprint on a POS. But it is still moving money. UPI is a protocol play, right? UPI was never a solution play. UPI was never a platform play. UPI was a protocol and a network play. And hence all of you, right? All of you thriving on the network. Then in the network play, it was about unification. So the protocol was all about moving money from one address, any address, payment address, virtualized payment address to any address, any currency, any device, any authentication. Literally, we wrote this for in the first one, right? We want to do that. And I was looking at the 5 aspects we talked about in the original paper: simplicity, innovation, cost, trust. And we attacked each of them very systematically. Beautiful to read. And as an architect, we get goosebumps when I look back.
And in fact, one thing that attracted me the most, and the first paper that I wrote internally of why we should jump on the UPI bandwagon, was because of the separation of authentication, authorization, and execution at a protocol level, which means that effectively what it means that we could reimagine how this would happen from one product to another product seamlessly without being bound by a monolith. And Dilip, I think Dilip's point
just to Rahul, just to close it out, I'm sorry, is that I think is the way to approach. As an architect, I would say, how do you get to 600, 700 million people?
100%, yeah.
By unifying further the Aadhaar-enabled face authentication, self versus assisted. Now we are doing a self mode of UPI, right? Self-service. Aadhaar is an assisted payment, and we have been doing it. And if you want to restrict it to 2,000 rupees, put restriction to 2,000 rupees. If you think there's a little bit of a trust and awareness issues and all that which you need to deal with, of course you need to deal with it. Now we are talking about offline payments. We are talking about. I'll ask this question because it's easier for me to ask question. Why is a FASTag not a UPI payment? It's a tag. It's a receptacle and a payment instrument. So it's a very interesting way to reimagine UPI, and then suddenly says, if there is money moving, it's on the rail, and there's only one API to deal with, right?
I agree. In fact, why not
protocol allows, I think, self-service, assisted, including Aadhaar-enabled onboarding, low-cost transaction, offline transaction. I think it's all there, 200 rupees. These are the building blocks that we should fix right now that allows the expansion to 700. While we do, grievance handling, awareness, and trust building, and all that thing as an ecosystem. What we have to do, no choice. But multilingual and all that thing, we can actually do it very, very easily, I think. So that's why
in fact, you can reimagine insurance claims with authorization that is completely different, but unified at the level of claims processing through UPI. The whole unbundling of the various layers of what a transaction is, and then making it a protocol, really allows us to reimagine things in beautiful ways. And to Dilip, your point, the denominator and numerator, I hadn't thought of it like that. I think it's phenomenal because everybody is thinking about new opportunities at the numerator level, right? Whether it is lending, whether it is insurance distribution or product creation or investments, broking. The denominator and growing the denominator itself presents so many other opportunities that the ecosystem can participate in, right from education, awareness, increased real-time detection of possible abuse or frauds in a particular way. There are so many opportunities. And for people to think that payments is not done, what is it I can build on top of payments? Payments is not done. I mean, payments itself, like you're saying, moving from 200 million to 500 million is a Herculean task. And I want everybody to take away that there is a lot of opportunity even there in making payments happen, as well as in ensuring that while making payments happen, we are creating the ecosystem in the right way for the next set of users who are coming on board. Phenomenal, guys. I think one of the things that I think Pramod you touched upon, and
not only the number of and payments. When I talk about payments, I think there are 3 things it keeps running in my mind. One is the number of users. Second is number of use cases that are possible to deal with. And third is the frequency, right? What is how are we able to build the high velocity behaviors, high velocity kind of patterns inside the payment. So I think the growth is phenomenal in all 3, right? Because when you look at, Pramod was talking about simplicity, right? And this is where I feel our regulator is a little ahead of us, and we keep catching up what they keep thinking of, be it tokenization. Pramod spoke about simplicity, right? They have already laid out a network for less than 200 rupees offline transactions, just to give a great customer experience, right? Because, I'm seeing there are the UPI one-time mandate or a block functionality, right? It offers promise to pay, right? Which is only possible
It's
today
a
with
smart
the
contract.
checks and those kind of things, right? With the evolution of technology, of decentralized technologies, the power of token, the power of smart contracts. So I'm saying that the whole use cases can actually go crazy, and that is in turn actually going to get more business done, contribute more back to the economy. So I think payments, we are just starting, Rahul. That's what is the feeling I get.
I'm with you, Dilip. Every day feels like cliched, but every day feels like day one, even in payments, even for us today. And on a lighter note, I think like Dilip was mentioning that while there is a lot that we could have done yesterday, NPCI, the pace at which NPCI is moving with innovation and product creation, it is very, very difficult to keep up even for the fintech ecosystem. Every other month, Dilip and I have a conversation where Dilip talks about Rahul, you need to be doing more, hire more, build faster.
That I agree with him.
That's phenomenal. So I think changing gears slightly, one of the things that Pramod you touched upon and Dilip you touched upon, saying that you talk about even Web3. Now that we have explored different models, right? I think Aadhaar is a model where it is kind of government owned, sponsored, centralized system and needs to be like that if you want to actually achieve the goal of
It's what's
digital
called a
identity for
foundational
every.
identity. Called a
It's
foundational
foundational
identity.
identity. Yeah. UPI is more of I would say, an ecosystem play, wherein it is centralized infrastructure that allows participants to build on top of it for realization of value for the masses. Account aggregator is a open approach, an open protocol approach, where the protocol is defined and is becoming will become a standard, but anybody who's allowed to participate as the from the regulator will be able to actually build their own systems. And now there is the Web3 world and decentralized finance world. So when we think about digital public goods, right, and building digital public goods, how do we think about what is the right approach given all the factors about data privacy, possible centralization of too much power in a single entity, big tech, all of that? How do we think about what is the right model from an architecture perspective for digital public goods?
No, I think it's pretty clear in our mind, frankly speaking. It's always the decentralized or federated sometimes, there's a subtle difference between them, approach of multi-parties providing the same service. So even if it's an authentication service, we could have had many people providing authentication service. But when it comes to attestation, so what does Aadhaar do? Aadhaar is about uniqueness attestation. I think it's not issuing an identity to you. You are your identity. You already had a name. You already had date of birth and address and so on. You took that data, went to UIDI and said, please attest this data for me. Put a chapa, put a seal, digital seal, and then through that digital seal, now I can make authentication claims and so on, and that everybody knows that this is a unique identity number that I received from the government. Now, where does government IDs come in play? To open bank accounts and so on. So that's why we really played for subsidies. India's continue to be a huge subsidy system, $50 billion US or whatever every year we spend, maybe even more now. So we solved specific purpose through those building blocks. But if you look at even everything else we did after that, everything is actually decentralized. So it's a very funny thing is that people think everything we did is attached to Aadhaar. Actually, it's not. E-sign. E-sign was purely a protocol play. We wrote the spec. All of you could be an e-sign provider. Yeah. And I keep asking, like, Dilip, why are you not a provider? But nevertheless, and this is where I think we may have been, like Dilip says, a little bit slow. We should have done it yesterday type of situation. And this is where we are saying, why is all of JAM, Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, not an authentication and eKYC mechanism? For example, we do Aadhaar auth and eKYC. Mobile, we do auth. We don't do eKYC on mobile. But if Airtels and these guys could have offered an eKYC service on top of it. And most importantly, the J part of it, Jan Dhan, you have a wallet provider. Why are you not offering authentication and eKYC on top of that? I can sign in to Taj or wherever into using PhonePe, eKYC auth, but it may not be yours. The subtlety now comes to what is DPG then? DPG is the specification. So we always ask the question, what is the minimum digital public good we can do? And it's always a spec. If you do spec and allow many providers, that's the most preferred way of doing DPG. Okay, so DPG is the spec. Digital public, then the service providers offer. eSign is an example of it. ONDC backend, all these guys are a great example of it. UPI is a great example of that, where the spec was there, implementation was there, but UPI needed a central switch because of settlement. And if you were settling, literally every transaction was being settled on a ledger, we didn't need NPCI to run anything other than facilitate the network. So NPCI is more of a facilitator of UPI network. Not necessarily, and as the technology improves, their settlement systems will go near real time, and then you'll say, yeah, our settlement is now pretty much on the ledger, and we don't really have to care anything. That's a direction. Then what NPCI as an organization would still have to play a facilitator, network facilitator role.
Right? But in financial services specifically, isn't one is the protocol and the standard. Two is the governance and the controls. Now, if it's protocol and standard for multiple in a federated model of execution and operations, where does the governance and the controls?
Let's talk about identity. Let's talk about identity and authentication. Let's talk about, and I've been a huge fan of this, been asking, maybe these days we should do, is auth and KYC on UPI.
I've been asking that too. And in fact, I was going to say, auth, KYC, there was a project we were chasing with Dilip and team also, and eSign on UPI. It's
one of the, I think, again, one of these things, it'll happen. Like Dilip says, we have so much we should have done, so much we can do. It's just a question of, I think, lining up the stars. Sometimes it's not time yet, right? Sometimes there's always a timing, policy window, political window, behavioral and acceptance window. Society has to accept it also, readiness for it, right? So sometimes you just line it up. It's okay. I'm not too worried about it, but we'll do it. I'm very sure we'll end up doing it. Is the J part of JAMs, each of JAM being an auth eKYC instrument of an individual. It's a very powerful thing. That if I means a common API, but you as a wallet provider, or SBI as a bank provider, HDFC as a bank provider, or somebody else as a wallet provider, become the account and auth provider. But NPCI can facilitate that through a common API and routing it to you. You are the auth provider, but facilitated through NPCI as a network play, making it amplification of integration easy, right? So one time, one API to integrate, and suddenly you get login with any UPI account becomes a one time, instead of each of you trying to sell your own auth layer, right, with your own API. And then you are the provider. Let's talk about that scenario. Who is accountable for it? There's layers, right? There's spec. Spec is facilitated by, let's say, NPCI. And this NPCI says to participate as an auth provider and eKYC provider onto the UPI, you shall do, these are the procedure rules or certification rules. Then you say, if authentication fails or wrongly authenticated, what is accountability and liability of the auth provider? NPCI is not the auth provider at that time. You as a wallet provider or the SBI as a bank account provider is auth provider. They are saying, I, as an account owner of that individual, quite like money transfer. And I always wonder, we are perfectly okay moving money, but we are not okay saying yes or no to an authentication. We're already doing it, right? So I mean, that has to be less risk than moving money. But we already authenticate. But what happens is that the assets these big banks and wallet companies, banks, especially banks who have built up, it's no more an internal asset. It's not about digitized automation of some core banking. They become reusable building block for the rest of the ecosystem. They can charge. What's stopping from banks and wallets to say, oh, we'll put a eKYC charge of 2 rupees, quite like Aadhaar, or 2, 3 rupees. And there's suddenly a pretty 100 million odds going on. And why not? And then people, suddenly what happens is it gives choice to people. Decentralized identities to people, decentralized the choice to people to, I use this here and this there. Now the other extreme of that. So this is an example of a federated identity. Centralized identity is Aadhaar, federated identity is UPI, identity on UPI, KYC on is federated. Decentralized is where, completely an individual organization it doesn't have to be blockchain, but it's offered as a decentralized identity. But the trust levels of that will differ, acceptance levels will differ. To check into a Taj hotel, it might be okay to use Google identity or any other decentralized identity on a blockchain, self-sovereign. I am Pramod. Okay, feel free. But something might say, no, you need an attested identity, attested by someone of authority, so that I
Some
can open a
authority
bank
that is
account.
recognized. And that could be
Yeah.
use case by use case. It's a
case by use
choice
case.
based on a use case of what you want.
Absolutely.
Dilip, your views on this, and how do you think about it? And how do you think about the future in a way, like the role of NPCI from running the systems to owning the standards, and any other thoughts?
See, today, as Pramod rightly said, the Web3, while there are a lot of use cases, a lot of discussion back around, I think one thing which they have not solved is how the whole transaction approach, right? And today, can anybody come back and say worldwide that, we run the decentralized technologies, but we can run a billion a day transactions on that platform? I think they have not. So I think Web3 is still in the journey mode, right? In the sense it's evolving day by day, and it's a great technology. I'm a big fan of this decentralized technologies, and especially two things. One is the smart contracts, right, which gives you the programmability to this whole approach in terms of, can we decide dynamically the conditions on which the transactions will happen, not happen? Yes, I think it's an amazing idea. Can we look at some more contract enforcements, which are multi-party contracts, or a specific conditional contracts? Can we enforce that back as a part of technology? I think the only way to do it is smart contracts, right? And the other thing which fascinates me is the power of token, right? The power of token is again amazing. When you look at it, when the token representing an asset is a crazy thing, right? Today, and while NFT is much, I believe it's much lighter way to sensationalize and create a atmosphere, right? But if you look at financial services or any other services, right? When you have the token which is underlying asset to that, I think it's a crazy thing, right? Today, and many use cases, right? Whether it's a securities market, whether it's but the financial markets, whether it's the insurance, whether it's the user having a custody of that asset, right, in his phone or in his possession, is actually the power of token, right? And which is where Pramod was talking about that. How do we reduce the dependencies on the intermediaries? How do we reduce the dependencies on, if you are going to actually build the Web3 like a Web2, right? You are still going to create 2-3 large organizations in the world, and they will still control instead of the current big tech platform. So I think the power of tokens and power of the smart contracts is very fascinating. And when you look at whether it's a protocol play, whether it's a decentralized play, or whether it's a centralized play, in my assessment, it's going to be a journey, Rahul. That's what personally I believe, because the India is such a market, right? It's always wants to be, India will be ahead of some markets in some areas. We will be in line with in some areas, and we might be a little bit behind compared to the some areas compared to the developed world. So I think as far as the country is concerned, it's fairly diverse country, and leaving that user a choice is going to be very important, right? And which is where I'm saying we might end up in next 3 to 5 years having some of the platforms completely decentralized, some of the platforms running on protocols, some of the platforms are completely federated, and some of the platforms still centralized, right? So I think we might end up, and what Pramod was talking about, our foundational identity, Aadhaar. So we still continue to use Aadhaar in a big way in 5 years, because the India is going to be so complex, and while there might be many KYC providers, while everything will be used, right? As India will remain a kind of a biryani, right, for decades to come, as it exists today. But technology is very promising. I think I believe the government regulators are, even if you would have seen this budget or the regulators' policies, RBI has formed RBI Innovation Hub. RBI has been doing the hackathons. So I think the technology has a great promise, and I believe that in next 3 to 5 years it will spread like a wildfire, but it will coexist along with other things what we have built till now, which is India Stack, right? It will coexist along with that in that sense. That's
I
what
think,
is.
I think that,
In fact, one of the things that I want to just add on, Rahul, is that so if you look at the token, that Dilip is absolutely right that the two interest. So e-mandate is is a sort of smart contract, programmable minimally, not programmable in a free flow programming language point of a programming. But if you had put in a small programming language script engine there, it would have been a programmable smart contract. It's a digitally signed contract that gets triggered. It will get triggered. No difference. So a lot of us we differentiate as at least architect, differentiate blockchain technologies versus the constructs like token, constructs like verifiability of token, provability of token. When I say I have this car, when I say I own this, I am an engineer. When I say that, is that a provable claim? Is that a verifiable claim? And is it reusable in a tradable and transactable asset, right? That means the moment that happens, fungibility of such thing very, very high. The token allows fractionality as well. So it's very interesting excitement about this, that today's stocks are one. This is why
fractional ownership.
so Google just did 20-1 split Google stock, right? A couple of days ago. It's because common man just couldn't own anymore the stock value. But if you had fractional stock on a tokenized base, why would you have to do stock split? It's a very interesting question to even ask. So we might, the tokenization, verifiability of it, and fractionality of it, and attached with smart contract is a very, very programmability of it. It's a very interesting architectural construct. Doesn't mean blockchain, but we could. I think
so the technology itself is a means to an end. If the end is to be able, like you mentioned, smart contracts, creating abstractions that allow for fractional ownership, creating tokens, not tokens as NFT tokens on blockchain, but tokens as a construct that can immutable, prove ownership, verifiable, digitally at very low cost, transactable, transferable. And if BLT is the technology that serves this purpose the best, then it should be used on that merit. But sometimes the conversation gets reversed. We try to actually find out how do we use BLT for doing all of this, and that's the unfortunate part about this.
And also, I think the intermediary part Dilip was saying is very key, and that is where the interoperable the more we create protocols and rules of the game, the less intermediary need to be there, because the edge points, actual transactional edge points, can transact between them. You don't have to be in the middle, especially with the new generation tech. Old tech needed files moving, somebody moving the file and all that thing. So obviously you had this intermediaries also charging cost. Today, that's ridiculous to think about it. You can even think about global. I think that's very, very key for us. So if we play into this asset tokenization, verifiable, provable, transactable, tradable, fractional, attached to promises that I can make with the smart contracts, it's very, very interesting that with that, I said, now I can participate in transaction, and transactional participation when it comes, if it is less intermediary, there will be some intermediaries, there might be some intermediaries, that's okay, but minimal intermediary, really edge to edge, which is what a lot of this protocol play is all about. It's to decentralize that, to say it's a peer-to-peer, just do it. But the participation rules and the contracts are very, very clear. They're digitally signed and they're immutable. They can't be played with. And that's when a combination of decentralized power, extreme low cost, empowerment of individuals, it's a choice. But at the time, I think Dilip made a very important point. I want to put that in there will be some to establish high trust in a decentralization network. You might have to have a negative list being centralized. See, positive lists are easy to be decentralized. So if I say rating, a 5-star rating to you, of course, you will flaunt it in your decentralized network, saying, hey, I have digitally signed 5-star. In the last 5 years, I made 4.8-star rating in urban company or somewhere, right? As a plumber, sure, I'll flaunt it. Or I'm an engineer with great number, 90% or whatever, ranked number 2 and all that thing, I'll flaunt it. But on the negative, we don't. So negative list where shared negative rating, shared fraud infrastructure might somehow that very difficult to decentralize. So the decentralization work if in a high trust mode, only if you have some central verification some central verification against the claims that individuals don't make. Individuals will never say, I had 2 crimes. I had, gone and, like completely drunk driving I did. And I'm not going to say it, all right? I'm going to be saying I'm a brilliant driver and I have 4.8 driving. But there's a negative list. The negative list typically end up centralizing. So I think that's very important to keep. Any networks need some central registries with APIs, some central registries. And that we must balance that out. Yeah.
So it's a combination. But
yeah,
specifically on the point on a negative registry being centralized, and to the point about payments still being the rails on which financial services for financial inclusion will get built. Is it time now, Dilip, for a centralized fraud registry for this ecosystem, especially given the growth going forward? Right? We've all done, I think the ecosystem does a tremendous job in trying to actually stay ahead. But it's a game of continuously staying ahead and investing like anywhere else in the world when it comes to financial frauds, payment frauds, etc. But is it time now to build digital public goods as infrastructure for fraud detection and fraud prevention? And is that being thought about? And what do you think?
See, for a country like India, it's a very complex problem to solve, if you really ask me, right? Because there is the way I look at it, that and you need to look at a traditional cyber fraud kill chain, right? So you need some mechanisms to create a prevent. You need some mechanisms to create to have a detect, and you need to have some mechanism to have a respond, and you need to have some mechanism to recover. Let me just peel the onion in each one of them, right? So prevent is, you need to have a solid awareness, right? I don't think there is any solution on that, right? So the awareness is super critical, right? If we want these guys, because if the awareness is not there, it will mess up somewhere, right? So we will, while the investments in the building up the infrastructure, growing up the pie of the businesses is looked into. What you were asking about, what fintechs should do, is fintechs also must have the ability to deliver the compliance and awareness, right? Because that is the only way they can grow big, grow to the citizen scale services, right? The other way to look at prevent is, when you look at the one aspect is awareness. The second aspect is, can you actually have your designs, right? Your designs as the privacy by design, security by design, embedded back in this. And, to be honest, when you look at UPI, and maybe we could have done this before, but the regulator was smart enough to include ODR, like for example, dispute resolution real time, right? Resolve the dispute, right? So can we not create the account block, fund block, right? I'm assuming that the user, see, today, even if you look at UPI, there is no fraud because of the technical reason, right? So most of the cases, right, the customer is defrauded because of some promise, or he finds some fake ad on the social media, or those kind of things, right? So can we not give a ability to him to block his funds, right? So those kind of things, actually we could have done it, but I think still we have enough time on hand, and we should do this kind of things on the prevent side. The second is detect, right? We already have the AI based model to detect the frauds and real time decline, and obviously, when you look at detect, a lot more technologies can be built up, like sharing of fraud data, sharing of negative lists, as we were talking about, and some of the things already exist, Rahul, right? While we don't have the centralized fraud repository organization wide, but you are aware, right? On UPI, if there is a fraud, negative mobile number, we block it centrally, right? So the mobile number is not being able to use for any other transaction. Same is with IFSC and account number. So we are already integrated with the telcos. Negative TRI publishes the negative mobile number on our decentralized technology. So we are already integrated, but it's a delayed data, but we still do it, right? Whatever it is, at least 1 month is a risk period. But after 1 month, that if there is a negative number listed by TRAI, we actually block it in UPI. So I'm saying that the detect is very important, and also it's a huge investment and technology led approach, right? To detect this very efficiently and communicate back to the ecosystem so that the negative list is not able to move beyond the point. He can do the fraud once, but at least after once he does the fraud, right, he's not able to replicate it further, right? In that, because whether we like it or not, while we do the KYC, there is the country has, while everything is not moved yet on other, there are fake documents and those kind of issues we have as a ecosystem. So the weak KYC frauds are there in the ecosystem. Then we need to have a response, right? Today, the law enforcement agencies network, right? And we have been talking to MHA. You must have seen the recent UPI awareness fraud, where we have that now MHA has a central number, central portal to report frauds.
The cyber safe portal. Yeah.
So I'm just saying we need to have the response mechanism very clear, right? And the law and enforcement is a federated issue as far as the Union of India, right? So there is a cyber. So some states do a good job, some states are catching up on the building up the cyber ability to detect the cyber frauds and prevent and identify the syndicate fraud locations and those kind of things. So respond is also extremely important. And finally, the recover, right? While the recover, RBI has been again ahead of time to create that the recover guideline, which is where if you respond back within 2 days of you understand your account is debited, and you respond, call back your bank, so you're completely protected on your what you call your account balance. So I think that the lot of efforts are required in this all four chains, and I think we have been trying to do some parts of that, Rahul, but more efforts are required. Clearly, there is no doubt about that, and not only from NPCI, but the law enforcement agencies, the ecosystem, and the telecom operators, everybody in that sense together.
And it's a very complex problem, like you said, because I think there has to be also outside of the pillars that you mentioned, the ability to possibly even challenge and rectify the presence of an identity, which could be the biggest piece that becomes a problem in creating any sort of centralized registry, because false positives and false negatives both are extremely difficult, and we need to actually get to the point.
False positives for a lot of times privileged people like us. We have access, we can call if there's an issue, we know people. So we go back to that. It's extremely important that when we set up, real-time frauds and so on, we also recognize false positives, false negatives. At least you missed out. Okay, then you have to deal with it. False positives that you are being accused of being fraud, and then
false negatives for learning, but false positive is affecting somebody's life to a significant extent.
And almost always in all our systems, these are exception conditions. We as like engineers, we deal with happy use cases, the most common use cases. And when things go wrong, we don't automate it. We don't do anything in that exception cases. So because of that, fraud processes and systems are batch-based, human-centric, heavily human. You call this person, you call that person, some batch files going, and it takes weeks to solve, maybe even months to solve. Unless we resolve that aspect, and the exception handling and recovery in any failure, business failure or tech failure, has to be very focused and automated as well. Otherwise, we have people who get trapped into that.
It has to have an SLA with an automatic resolution process in place. Because the question always is about payments leading the way, and obviously being the high frequency use case that covers the entire population. Should a fraud registry emerge from there that serves all the verticals, whether it is investments, whether it's insurance, like a claims fraud on insurance, to what extent can it be linked to fraudulent behavior on payments? To some extent, it can be linked, right? Similarly with lending. So some sort of a fraud registry that allows maybe not for decision making, but for some sort of a history, almost like a bureau from a fraud perspective that doesn't make a decision, but gives a signal. But it does need to have this capability to actually rectify automatically and rectify false positives primarily more automatically. But
Rahul, one thing I would be very wary of, frankly, even as a technologist and working on the societal systems, I sort of realized that first of all, I think bringing all the regulators together on a table and getting common thing is going to be hard. It's just the nature of it. Nothing, it's not because they doesn't want to do or their intent is not there. It's like no different from getting multiple ministries or departments to sit together and do something. It just doesn't happen. Very hard to make it happen. So as an architect, I would even pose to you, you're a CTO. How does each actor do one thing very well, but how can we get a combined effort? If insurance guys do one thing, just do that part, and UPI guys do that part. Okay, NPCI, SEBI guys do this part. Okay, one thing very well. Are they building block this decentralized implementation approach, but the collective effort? That means when you combine these three services, suddenly the power is very high, rather than creating a central service that all of us have to agree to.
Interesting.
Because it's very impractical. So I think always ask this question: what can one thing UPI team do independently? And we convince SEBI saying, okay, what can one thing Zerodhas and all of you sit together and figure out a way to do? That's one thing insurance guys can do. Maybe, and if everybody is an API-based play, maybe we have a larger combinatorial impact.
That is, Pramod, that's actually very true from a technology building blocks perspective, that or capabilities that each of these possible functions can build. I think where it breaks down and is more difficult to solve is for information sharing or data signals that translate directly from a capability on one vertical into a decision possibly in another vertical. And fraud is just one example. KYC is a classic example of another way where RE to RE KYC sharing from a data perspective, but different liabilities, possibly different standards of where if technology can come in to almost attest to that data being true and verified, irrespective of which is the vertical or the regulator associated
but today
with it. I think
exist, right?
that's
but
what
Rahul,
I think.
Technologies exist today in terms of independently each regulator or like NPCI. Imagine NPCI putting out an API with digital signature saying that this is the fact about what happened in UPI. I'm not making a claim that the same person will also defraud in insurance. That's NPCI can't do. But NPCI can say, in UPI, these numbers or these VPAs or whatever has been detected.
No, I perfectly agree. It just becomes the other regulator accepting that fact as okay for a use case. Whereas capability is more about re-executing it, using that capability for your own use case.
We have done this before. When UIDI literally authentication was launched in 2011, and I know Nandan at that time had did road shows and going to RBI said, who are you? Right, literally. And then because UIDI was barely there, we had hardly anybody enrolled. We had like 1 lakh people enrolled in the 1 billion people. What KYC do you want us to change? We don't even know this damn thing is going to work, right? So it takes, I think, it's a systematic layered approach. Build the building block, then get it approved for a specific use case. For example, like even if UPI API comes up, will it be accepted or EKYC by SEBI? We don't know, but get started, and then subsequently, when the volumes kick in, all these regulators are forward-looking. We have, like Dilip was saying, they all have good.
Extremely progressive.
They're actually we are one of the luckiest country, very serendipitously lucky to be in where we are in India.
And it's recognized by almost every country in the world as the regulators.
I think they do have to worry about two things. One, is there a large demand from the society itself naturally coming? Then they will listen to it. Second, they will always wear a risk hat, which they must wear, and to see if there is a risk, and if the risk is mitigated through control measures like 2,000 rupees only, to start with. Okay, sure. That's how you start. That's how we started UPI too. We didn't know if UPI was going to work or blow up. So we started with very small numbers. Now, slowly and steadily build up the trust and system. So let it be like Aadhaar KYC was acceptable only for no frill account. You remember, right? 2012.
Yeah.
But now it's acceptable for everything else. It takes time. Let it be. But I think
that's what I also
systematically
agree with.
building is very key.
I also agree with Pramod. I think because the regulator also is highly accountable for the issues in the system. So I think it's a right approach, and even to that, in my assessment, to even kind of work with the ecosystem to get the UPI as a system getting approved, getting nurtured itself is a huge risk which RBI took at that point of time. Nobody gives them a credit. That's being apart. But I'm just saying that the regulators are very progressive in the country, but they have to take the cautious approach in terms of step up build, right? That's the right way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That's all I really had. Any parting thoughts, Dilip, Pramod? Dilip, you can go first.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to do, boss. Lot to do. I think we are sitting on a tipping point, and I think whether it's a technology, whether it's a coverage, whether it's use cases, I think we are. There is an opportunity for India to lead the world, and I think we will. We have done a fairly decent job last few years, and I think we got a great opportunity to lead the world to drive the brand India to as a public good of whatever public good infrastructures what we have built, to drive it for a more public good in the world. And I think we should not miss that opportunity in our lifetimes.
Great.
Yeah. So I think it was wonderful catching up with both of you and having this conversation. I would again agree with Dilip there, saying our India's method to this madness about building lightweight public goods on top of private innovation thrive, and focusing on 2 or 3 very fundamental aspects. That is choice to the individual, inclusion, that even when we designed the UPI, we were very clear. There will be people with no smartphones. There will be people with feature phone. There will be people who can't read and write English. There will be multilingual. We have to worry about all that. So designing for inclusion, designing for diversity, and designing for choice is, I think, this fundamental choice and empowerment of individuals, right? At the end of the day, we are a democratic country, and people must have their power. Power must be vested back in the people. It's very, very fundamental for us. I think we are showing the world. It's exciting times, but like Dilip said, so much more to do. And it's exciting that we have so much bubbling in our head, and all of us, I think, collectively, we'll have to step up our game, including you, Rahul. And you can't keep telling me that you only UPI. You have so much more to do in a PhonePe. So I think by doing that, and it's like, if you can export or offer, like we offer yoga to everything, knowledge we always offered historically, right? India, if you could offer digital public goods to the world, then the private innovation that happens here automatically gets taken to the world. So if UPI goes in the world, PhonePe to the world, companies will all go there, because you have a natural advantage of going there. And for them, it's not a risk, because they also have tens of application companies who will be competing. They have no risk because they are still following the DPG multi-system approach. There's not a global lock-in or anything that is going to face. So our ability to give DPG, ability to offer digital public goods to the world, is a way our innovators like you can also go along with that. I think very exciting opportunities.
No, 100%. In fact, I think we are all recipients of the magic that free open source software has really created, right? I mean, we couldn't have thought of building all that we built if we didn't have the open source capabilities that were offered by Yahoos of the world, Googles of the world, even Facebook and others, Netflix. There's some phenomenal open source software, the software under the Apache Foundation, all of that. I think our answer, while India as a whole has been late to the bandwagon of contributing back, we today are significantly more recipients than contributing back to the open source community. That's also changing fast. But our standards, specifications, protocols, and more importantly, the architectural approach to digital public goods as infrastructure is that give back to the world. Whether UPI itself goes international or the UPI model is adopted by other countries to build and create innovation, and the other model is adopted, I think that itself is a huge proud moment. While
frankly, I won't even hesitate. Why not? Why not UPI protocol? Not UPI. The
100%.
system.
In fact, I think
protocol
already
is just ready. There's 3 APIs or something, man. Just what's there, and somebody else can imitate.
It's an open specification. Open data.
If we think this is something with others, when others see it, it's easy to imitate, right? So what happens is it might have been difficult in 2014, but now any country can imitate this pretty easily. So we would rather give it, saying that why imitate?
And it should be a proud moment for them to actually take it.
I think we are contributing at EkStep Foundation. Entire work on Sunbird and everything else is all open source MIT. So we are contributing a lot more to open source. You're right. These days, backend protocol is all open source. Yes. So we are open sourcing a lot more. And I know Dilip, his commitment and intent is very, very clear in terms of getting the DPG going, actually open sourcing the DPG. Obviously, this, he'll have to deal with the regulator and government, and what does it mean, and how do we, how do we take this as a soft power game? All that thing he'll have to work through. But I think it's a no-brainer in my mind. We must actually give DPG and then allow our innovation ecosystem, like all of you thriving innovation ecosystem, continue to go support rest of the countries.
On a lighter note, Pramod, Dilip needs to do less for me to do something beyond UPI. UPI is already international and we are lagging behind as usual. So I need to clone myself and my team to be able to actually do something beyond UPI. Thank you so much, Pramod.
We have a lot more to do.
Dilip, thank you so much, Pramod. Thanks a lot. Amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Thank you.